2021 meeting of council. If you'll all rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
If you will, please remain standing and pray with me. Lord God, Lord, we just thank you for your presence, Lord, always. We thank you for who you are and what you are to us, Lord. Pray, Lord, that in all that we do tonight, the words that we say, the actions that we take, Lord, everything will be pleasing in your sight. Pray in your name, Jesus. Amen.
Amen. For regular public comments tonight, I have William Ruley. Does he need to sign in on this one? Okay. All right. We'll come to the podium. State your name and address, please. 3 minutes.
3 minutes. I can have it written down so I have 3 minutes than that. I am William Houston Ruley Jr. I live at 1015 Culberson Road. It's the chapel. And I have actually really it's an open letter to Reverend Owens, and fortunately a lot of great people here from Five Stones. And Reverend Owens and I sent a few emails back and forth. He sent some letter out to a couple of joining neighbors. They contacted me. I responded because the letter basically said, give us proposals for whatever. And we've been going through this for 2 years, so I figured there was a lot on the website, so I just referenced the website. But anyway, he said that they were instructed by the town to sue, for Five Stones to sue you. And sometimes you read things and you scratch your head and you go, doesn't that sound right? So I don't believe that the town instructed Five Stones to sue. I prefer to think on things that are good, honorable, and right. We desire the restoration of fallen man to God and their neighbor. There are a large number of churches within this community. Google alone has over 20 in the community, some dating back to the 1800s. America's reported to have 380,000 churches, with a population of 3.3 million. That's about a church for 87 Americans. When every American that has enough money to pay an attorney can sue, again, I don't believe the town instructed Five Stones to sue over the May 10th deceived legal decision. Wesley Chapel exonerated illegal activity of Five Stones as they committed having 150 preschool enrollment instead of 65. My parents and teachers taught me illegal activity, except in the case of genocide, was sin against God. Must not be a popular concept anymore. You've extended grace. You gave them 150. And they rewarded you for the lawsuit that now we're going to have to pay for. They couldn't be trusted with the original CUP, so expansion makes no sense for a K through 12 school or for a giant daycare or for adding 8 acres of land. Has Five Stones ever considered how room for a court of law who's really keen on the law being obeyed, despised? Jesus' commands are not suggestions, and he provided them to protect both Christians and non-Christians. He established law to punish lawbreakers, not exonerate them. For the record, they indicated that anybody would sue them in this case. For this record, I encouraged my neighbors not to sue because we saw that going from 65 to 150 kids is a loss, and so we did that. But anyway, I have an amazing amount of information for the quasi-judicial. So anyway, can I give this to Cheryl just to check what you can have it? I didn't get it all to you, but just about. I'll give you the idea anyway.
Thank you. So that brings us to additions, deletions, and adoption of agenda. On the consent agenda, I need to add Pauline Morris to be appointed to the Communications Committee. We have received 2 applications. Chris McBride and Pauline Morris. And also need to add reaffirming committee liaison positions. I'll just go ahead and do that after the closed session, so we can make it 14A right before council comments. Does anybody else have anything they'd like to add or delete?
Motion to approve the agenda as amended.
Second.
All in favor? Okay. And that brings us to our consent agenda.
Second.
All in favor? That brings us to our planning board report and any comment from our planner.
I thought John's here this evening. So we had a fairly uneventful planning board meeting with nothing on the official agenda. We did do some reviews of procedures at the last planning board meeting, just to help bring them up to speed with some things related to how they operate, how the village council operates. As far as other activities, last month, been working on a few small administrative subdivisions. Arborbrook Christian Academy is in the process of purchasing land from Central Church, and we approved a 1 acre subdivision for them. As they pursue that, also been working, a gentleman on Potter Road that was re-subdividing a couple lots that had been combined about 15 years ago. Let's see, Heritage Subdivision, they got notice about their water and sewer capacity and have been working with Bonnie to submit their information, and Carolina Pets got notice about their water and sewer capacity as well a few weeks ago, so we expect that to be moving forward. So, not much else.
Thank you, Vaughn. That brings us, any questions for Vaughn? That brings us to our finance officer's report.
Okay. You have the November finance report. And during the month of November, we received in about almost $10,000 in tax money. Zoning permits were $2,200, and sales and use tax $6,600. Expenditures during the month were many of the routine items. Let's see here. We had some legal fees, and I want to talk to you in a minute about legal fees. And at the park, we did pay for another invoice from Bonnie's firm about the dam investigation, and I did check with Bonnie last Thursday, and they had not heard anything yet from the state, so there's no update there. We had some repair services at the park. We've had some gate issues. And that's about it for the ongoing things. Now, I did put in the agenda to do a budget amendment. I find I need 2 budget amendments. I looked at the travel and entertainment account, and to cover the rest of the year, we have been providing meals at the comprehensive plan each month. We have our holiday dinner coming up, and we have Deb's going to the essential class in Wilmington, so I need a budget transfer to move $1,150 to the travel and entertainment account. The other account is that legal fees. I went through the legal fees and looked at what we'd spent so far this year. We spent about $3,200 on general fees. We spent a little over $1,300 for the code enforcement, the Testimony Trust account. We spent almost $5,500 on Selco, and we've spent almost $9,000 on Five Stones. So if you extrapolate for the rest of the year for our general services, any of our lawsuits, I think we're going to need another $10,500 in legal fees. There is enough money for both of those to come out of contingency.
So what was the amount for the travel and training again?
$1,150.
That's an increase of 1,000?
Yeah, it's doubling it, yeah.
And you said the essentials class is in Wilmington?
The essentials class, yes.
Is there not one closer?
And there's an online one, but Deb preferred to go to in person. That's fine.
And then, so 1,150 for travel and,
10,500 for legal fees.
Councilman, would you like to make a motion?
Make a motion to move $1,150 from contingency to cover the training, the comp plan meals, training and entertainment line item in the budget. And do both of them together?
Pardon?
Do a separate motion for each thing?
I don't think so.
I think it's fine to put together.
Yeah.
Okay, and then to move 10,500 and contingency for legal fees.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
I also want to point out that during the month of December, I moved $500 in Park and Rec from events to repairs. And that's all I have. There's still no final rule.
Any questions for Sheriff? That brings us to our deputy report.
Starting back in November, shoplifting from Target, few larcenies from a couple subdivisions, and 17 motor vehicle crashes that month. October, had a couple more car break-ins at Dogwood Park. People leaving stuff in plain sight, getting the windows smashed out. Couple from Champion Forest got broken into, and the firearm was taken from one of those. That's pretty much it for October. There were 11 motor vehicle crashes that month of November. Couple more car break-ins from Dogwood Park. Same thing, cars, windows smashed in. And one from Anytime Fitness. And that's all I have.
We have a large crowd. Would you like to give a PSA about locking cars?
You just leave. I would like to think it's common sense. But
That is like.
the one in Champion Forest was a rifle taken. It wasn't a handgun, so we all know where these firearms go when they're stolen.
Please lock that car.
If you go to the park for a walk, don't leave your personal proceeds. Because it will not be there when you get back.
Take your gun.
The last time you were here, you talked about catalytic converters being stolen.
Yeah, I think we go ahead and clear some of them out.
Is that still happening in the same rate it was? Or?
Pretty certain the fellow that got crushed the other day is responsible for those. We got an Indian Trail. He was up in there cutting. And the car fell on him and crushed him while he was still in there.
I missed that.
Thank you, Brandon.
Brandon, are there any areas of the village,
Don't make me bring it back out.
are there any areas of the village that you see an increase in any activity that we need to be aware of?
The park, shopping centers this time of year, and packages on the porches. I try to ride through as many neighborhoods as I can, but I'm only one person, so just try to be mindful of that.
And that brings us to our Parks and Rec report. And our new Parks and Rec chair.
You know how to password to bed.
Hey, got a fun show. And we did. The holiday event with Cocos for Santa went very well. I think the attendance, Johnny,
It's just over 600.
was just over 600. Yeah, but if you add maybe the people came into the main entrance, which wasn't a lot, but still, about 600, give or take. So, train was a big hit, of course, it always is. The singing and the three folks who presented were great. The choral group Samantha and who was the last guy?
Jared Chugla.
Thank you. Actually did a wonderful job. Kept the mood very light. The children seemed to have a great time. Parents seemed to be having a good time. So,
The weather was awesome.
the weather held off, which was great. It was awful hot, Santa suit, but anyway. We stayed within budget, right, Cheryl? Well within what we had talked about last Monday. That was $3,080, if I recall. And each of the Park and Rec Committee, plus other volunteers, had a good showing. Mike actually had some folks left at the end that actually stayed to help clean up. Thank you to, first of all, the council for sponsoring the event, for putting up the funds to get it going. To Councilman Como and certainly to John, because the two of them just did a yeoman's amount of work. I got to sit down the whole time, so. But I enjoyed every minute of it, and this was done with somewhat short notice, so rightfully so. We will be very cautious about COVID and the new variants and all of that. So we're listening to as you folks are. It was actually your suggestion that got this one going. So again, appreciate it. Same for all the volunteers, the people that were there. So not a lot else to report on right now on the Park and Rec side. We are looking at, obviously very interested in the drain and remediation on that because of the drain that's there is collapsing in parts. And so we're going to look at other funding that seems to be available out there. I haven't gotten far into that yet, but we will obviously have to dive into that fairly quickly. So, yes.
After Brandon's report specifically, for some reason the park security cameras keep getting pushed off for budget reasons. I would hope that you and the committee, this point forward, will look into and push again for security cameras for the park.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm beginning to think, especially when we have events and things, that it's good to have, although most of the parking is over at Southbrook, which is, again, thank you to Southbrook. They allow us to use their parking for when we have large crowds like this. We don't want to make the park a parking lot. So it worked out well. Gator, the truck, was there, was kind of cute. The fire department showed for a while. We got to recognize the first responders, fire department, EMS, and police, of course, the sheriffs, the deputies. So that was great. And we need to keep doing things like that. Okay, it brings community together. Any questions?
I'd like to also thank the Union County Sheriff's Office. The deputies stood out there for hours directing traffic, and Mike Henry was one. I don't know the name of the other deputy, but that was a lot of work, and you're risking your life when you're standing in the middle of the highway. So anyway, kudos to them.
People are being pretty good from what I saw, which is great this time of the year. Actually, people don't want to get on Santa's naughty list. So, any other questions I can answer or that you have?
It was a great event.
It was a very nice event.
Yeah, it was
The
good
weather
weather.
was good. And I did make it to Santa and make the polish. So thank you.
There was she's not here, but there was a woman. I don't think I have a confidentiality clause, but there was a woman there. Her daughter, teenage daughter, said, "Yeah, she wants a father." And then the mother came back later and she says, "Yeah, there was a cute fireman there too." I said, "That's up to you. That's off my list. Go see Cupid. He's in that business." But that was just a funny event. And the kids are great. I mean, I just love the kids anyway. So they're just so honest and open. And we had some smaller ones. Some of them were okay. Some of them were Had a couple of screens, only two.
The photographer that was there, I took some photos on them earlier on, but we need to make sure we get those pictures so we can get them on Facebook.
There's a link that was put out there already to her pictures. Right? I saw them.
Okay.
That the committee did. So,
Oh, really? Okay.
John Dogan Park.
That wasn't on our official village.
No, I think we need to put it there. Yes.
I haven't seen them, yeah.
Okay. We'll do that.
Thank you so much. Appreciate all your hard work.
No. So it was all committee effort and Councilman Cuomo. It was just a great volunteer by everyone, quite frankly, to pull it together. So, and next year we'll be able to do a little better. Thank you.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas, everyone.
Hold Brad, you come.
So that brings us to item number 9 on our agenda, the public hearing on Foxstone's church. So I'm now going to open the evidentiary hearing for the Foxstone's church special use permit 13-04 amendment 2021-2. The applicant has requested to expand the scope of the permitted location in gross floor area, the development of the church located at 1,117 Cufferton Road, beyond the previously authorized amount, to expand the authorized enrollment of the preschool program, and also expand the special use permit to the adjacent parcel 061-05012 with the intent of establishing a K-12 school. The decision will be made by simple majority vote of the council. This hearing is a quasi-judicial evidentiary hearing. This means it is like a court hearing. State law sets specific procedures and rules concerning how this board must make its decision. These rules are different from other types of land use decisions like rezoning cases. The board's discretion is limited. The board must base its decision upon competent, relevant, and substantial evidence in the record. A quasi-judicial decision is not a popularity contest. It is a decision constrained by the standards and the ordinance and based on the facts presented. If you will be speaking as a witness, please focus on the facts and standards, not personal preference or opinion. Participation is limited. This meeting is open to the public. Everyone is welcome to watch. Parties with standings have rights to participate fully. Parties may present evidence, call witnesses, and make legal arguments. Parties are limited to the applicant, the local government, and individuals who can show they will suffer special damages. All other individuals may serve as witnesses when called by the board. General witness testimony is limited to facts, not opinions. For certain topics, this board needs to hear opinion testimony from expert witnesses. These topics include projections about impacts on property values and projections about impacts of increased traffic. Individuals providing expert opinion must be qualified as experts and provide the factual evidence upon which they base their expert opinion. Witnesses must swear or affirm their testimony. At this time, we're going to talk about disclosure on the board. The parties to this case are entitled to an impartial board. A board member may not participate in this hearing if he or she has a fixed opinion about the matter, a financial interest in the outcome of the matter, or a close relationship with an affected person. Does any board member have any partiality to discuss and refusal to offer?
Madam Mayor, I'd like to ask you recused. I was part of the planning board when we heard the five stones came before us, so I need to be recused.
Do I have a motion?
A motion to recuse Councilman Bledsoe.
Second.
All right, all in favor? Okay. It is the policy of this council that the recused council member shall step down from the dais and sit with the general public. The board member will return to the dais for the next matter on the agenda. The parties to this case have rights for any ex parte communication to be disclosed. Ex parte communication is any communication about the case outside of the hearing. That may include site visits as well as conversation with parties, staff, or the general public. Does any board member have ex parte communication to disclose?
I have nothing to disclose about the Five Stones Church, but I will disclose that I am friends and neighbors with one of the church elders, Patrick Quinn.
And I do believe that I forwarded all of any emails that I received to staff, and they were shared with the applicant.
Nothing to disclose other than the same. Forwarded all emails to the clerk.
Based on the disclosures we've heard from the council concerning partiality and ex parte communications, does any member of the board or any party to this matter have an objection to a board member's participation in this hearing?
Madam Mayor,
Yes, ma'am.
we have received disclosed communications from council. We have also received a number of communications that were not disclosed to us prior to a previous evidentiary hearing in this matter, which occurred in May of this year. On that basis, and given the extensive nature of those communications and the detailed correspondence which rose to the level of advising folks that are opponents of the Five Stones request that was made, we frankly ask all council members to recuse themselves from the hearing this matter on the grounds that those communications were not disclosed in advance of that hearing, and we have concerns about ex parte communications that may have occurred subsequent to and prior to that time.
I'm sorry, but can you identify yourself? I don't know who you are.
My name is Madeline Trilling. I'm an attorney with Scarborough and Trilling out of Concord, and I represent the church in this matter. You don't have to know that, but
You're looking to me for some guidance, yeah. So I think you feel free to ask her questions about her objection if you have them, or if you have additional information that's raised by what she spoke about. Feel free to share that. Otherwise, you would, if anyone thinks you ought to make a motion to recuse any of you, you can make that and take a vote.
Do you want to share some details on what specific items?
Councilmember Kemba, there are a number of communications that we received only pursuant to the public records request, and again, I'm not sure what occurred that was outside of that request. That were detailed communications advising members of the opposition as to how to proceed with regard to the prior CUP or SUP request. Generally, those communications are inappropriate in our opinion, I believe in the court's opinion also, and we believe that our constitutional rights were violated in that regard. So we ask the council again to recuse themselves on that basis. Is that correspondence occurred?
What information do you have to share with us other than just your say so?
What communications?
Yes.
Well, Councilman, you are a part of those communications. I imagine that you're familiar with them. But there was a number of communications that occurred with opposition members, again, prior to and subsequent to the May hearing of this year, that were advising. And again, it's your job, council member, to recuse yourself if you're aware of such communications. It's not my job to wave them around in front of you to make a point. It's your respectfully.
What basis are you requesting our recusal on that? If there's nothing, on what basis are you requesting our recusal if you don't have evidence or something else to present as to what?
To our knowledge, we disclosed everything that we were supposed to.
Prior to it was a May hearing, as you all know, it was not in relation to preschool capacity. At that time, there was a question of whether or not they were ex-parte communications that needed to be disclosed. And for example, Councilmember Kemba, I believe you said the same thing you just said, which is that you're neighbor with Mr. Quinn. There were also, again, subsequently, as recently as November, is when we received these communications, a number of correspondence that occurred with council, all of you all were involved, and that were inappropriate, and yet again were not discussed, occurred prior to that hearing that were not disclosed at that time, which creates a number of concerns, as you can imagine, about what has been disclosed at this juncture as well.
George, we'll turn to you for a second. Is there anything prior to the application from the church that excludes us from I've been around for.
Well, I'm not the
8+
Mike. I'm not
years.
the arbiter of that, and Ms. Trilling isn't either. She's raising an objection based on what she's seen, right? And so, what is important for the council to remember is the mere existence of ex parte communications does not cause an impermissible bias that creates a recusal obligation. You have to, if ex parte communications create a fixed determination in your minds that prevents you from making a decision based only on the evidence presented by the applicant and any other parties at this hearing, then that's a matter for which you should recuse yourself. But the mere existence of ex parte communications does not mean that you have to recuse yourself. It's whether or not those ex parte communications created an impermissible bias that has fixed your opinion on this application.
To be clear, if I may-
And Ms. Trilling may counter with that.
No, that was accurate. But additionally, we're entitled to have disclosure of those ex parte communications, and part of what I'm saying is that those communications were not disclosed in their entirety to Boston prior to the meeting.
Commissioner Moore.
I can tell you, again, I didn't see those until November, and that was only pursuant to a public records request that was made by.
So you made a public records request.
In
We
July.
supplied the records you requested
In November, yes.
in November. Where did we make a misstep?
Councilmember, I'm just making a motion, and I'm asking you to consider it.
Does anyone on the board feel like you've had ex parte communication that was giving you a fixed opinion and you cannot be neutral in proceeding forward with this hearing?
Formally, no.
No. All right, so. So now I'm going to turn it over to Vaughn to introduce this hearing, and we'll do the swearing in for the applicant.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think you covered a good deal of what I was going to say, but just to set the stage for what you'll be hearing tonight, in early August, Firestone's Church submitted an application to amend their special use permit as previously amended to expand the geographic scope of the permit to an adjacent parcel, construct a K-12 school with a maximum capacity of 800 students, expand the preschool program to allow up to 380 students, and permit the construction of a total of around 141,000 square feet of buildings, combined, existing, and new, on the campus. The proposed plan for the church property includes an expansion of the previously approved church building, a community chapel, a K-12 school, and a gymnasium, along with a variety of other buildings around the campus. The applicant has also proposed to initially use temporary mobile classrooms on the site during the interim period to accommodate the establishment of the K-12 school if the special use permit amendment is approved. Prior to this evening, the Planning Board held a public information meeting regarding the application in September, continuing that meeting until October. At the conclusion of the October meeting, they did make a recommendation on the application. The Village Council then set this evening as the quasi-judicial public hearing on the application. Staff has provided notice of the hearing in accordance with statute and the Village West Chapel zoning ordinance, including 2 newspaper notices and mailed notice directly to the applicant and the adjoining property owners, a posted notice on the property, and notice on the village website.
So now we need to call up the applicant. Anyone who wants to speak on the applicant's behalf to be sworn in. If you'll come forward and give our clerk your name and address, please.
My name's Eddie Moore.
Eddie Moore.
With McAdams.
I'm sorry.
With McAdams, McAdams. And my address is 3430.
340.
3430. Torrington Way. Suite 110.
These are people speaking for the applicant.
Where is it?
Charlotte.
We can hear the names and the addresses.
They'll be printed in the public, in the meeting notes.
Michael Wickline, W-I-C-K. Sorry. W-I-C-K-L-I-N-E. Design Resource Group.
I should have just had you bring your business card.
2459 Wilkinson Boulevard.
Wilkinson
Boulevard.
Charlotte.
Yep.
Okay.
Spencer Dixon, DXON.
D-I-X-S-O-N?
ON.
Oh, okay.
LS3P Architects. LS3P.
We interviewed once when we were building this building.
That's right.
Okay.
2 West Washington. You need address?
2 West Washington? Charlotte.
Greenville, South Carolina.
Oh, it's Greenville?
Yeah.
Oh. Okay.
Ryan Sutherland, Sutherland. And I'm with the same firm, LS3P.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Hi, Dina Neely, D-I-N-A, N-E-E-L-E-Y, 2001, East Chester Drive.
2 words?
No, 1 word. And that's in High Point. Okay.
Is there a firm or no?
Musco, M-U-S-C-O. Sports lighting, M-U-S-C-O.
Okay.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay.
Hi. First name is Andrew. Last name is Hill. Hill.
Andrew Hill.
Yep.
Okay.
Company name is CESO. Address is 4601 Park Road.
Park?
Park. P-A-R-K. Charlotte. Thank you.
It's Paul Henderson, P-A-U-L, Henderson, H-E-N-D-E-R-S-O-N. With Wave, W-A-V-E. 8620-8620 West Moreland Drive, all one word.
Charlotte?
Northwest. Concord. 28827.
My name is Alexander Herring. Alexander. Yeah, Herring. H-E-R-R-I-N-G. What else? What are
Your address and what your company or whatever.
4927 Waxhaw Farms Road. That's Waxhaw, North Carolina. And then my company is Covenant Works LLC, and we're a landscape management company.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Hey, my name is Bethany. Bethany with a B-E-T-H. That's okay.
A-N-Y?
Yes, ma'am. Mosteller, M-O-S-T-E-L-L-E-R.
Okay.
2013 Tailwood Drive. Waxhaw. And I'm here for Stepping Stones.
Okay, thank you.
I'm Christine, C-H. And it's H-S-U.
HSU?
That's it. And it's
How do you pronounce it?
Sue.
Okay.
And it's 3217 Ringtail Drive. Did she say she was at Ringtail?
No, she said Tailwood.
Okay, Ringtail Drive.
Okay, and you Waxhaw. And are you
with Stepping Stones, 5 Stones.
Okay.
Thank you.
I signed up to speak. Do I need to sign in here as well?
Yes.
Okay. If the name is Angela Owen.
Your name is Angela? No, I'm sorry, your last name's getting loud in here.
It's all right. Owen, O-W-E-N.
Owen?
Address is 6310 Pleasant Grove Road, Waxhaw.
Okay, and you're
Last time we had it.
5 Stones
This formal
partner.
tabled out.
Are you employed by 5 Stones or you're just Ralph's wife? Okay.
Receipts the other day.
Thank you.
If there's somebody
Hi.
who'd like to go.
I'm Allison Taylor.
Do we really have to do this?
ALISON?
Are you here representing the church? Yeah, no, so there'll be an opportunity for people that are not witnesses, and she'll get to that.
Oh, people that are coming are not.
Yeah, if you're not acting as a witness and being called, then you don't have to be sworn in. There will be a period,
told us we
but if,
I think we.
I mean, I would speak with her as a representative of the class.
Do you want my address?
I think it's gotten a little confusing. Let's get some clarification.
We're gonna text later, okay? You need to follow. I'm texting her too. Urban Outfitter.
All right, my apologies. This was meant for the witnesses that the applicant intends to call to provide evidence and testimony. So, Ms. Trilling, if someone hasn't came up to sign in or be sworn in and are providing evidence, will you identify them, please? If you're here to provide public comment for or against the application, we will provide a later time for public comment, and you will not need to be sworn in for that.
We just want to see how long it goes.
So what about all these people? I'm not sure all of them are. She will give me a call.
What I would suggest is swear them in. Don't worry about bringing them all.
One at a time?
Swear them in one at a time.
Okay.
Hi, Rachel Anderson. I'm a witness.
I think she's.
She was just identifying her.
We just spoke. She requested that I put my name on the list.
How do you spell Rachel?
RACHEL ANDERSON.
Okay.
900 Applegate Parkway. That's Waxhaw.
And do you have a position or a company?
I'm with Five Stones Church.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So now you need to be sworn in.
I suggested to Cheryl it'd be easier just to swear people in as Ms. Trilling calls them as witnesses. And Ms. Trilling doesn't need to be sworn, and I assume you're not providing any testimony. So I would just swear people in as they're called as witnesses.
Okay?
That'll be a lot easier.
Okay, so at this time, the applicant Five Stones will now present evidence and legal arguments in support of the request. As a reminder, any evidence and argument must focus upon the applicable standards. And before you begin, make sure you're sworn in, and then please state for the record your name, address, and relation to the case.
Call Spencer Dixon and Ryan Sutherland of ASVP.
Could you slowly state that for me?
Spencer Dixon.
Okay.
SPENCER DIXON, and Ryan Sutherland, RYANSUTHERLAND LS3P.
Okay. So we need to swear them in. You need to come over here. Please put your left hand on the Bible. Raise your right hand. Do you swear that the evidence that you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God.
I do.
Ladies and gentlemen, would you state your name and address for the record, please?
Sure. My name is Spencer Dixon with LSRP Architects, 2 West Washington, Greenville, South Carolina.
I'm Ryan Sutherland, also with LSRP Architects.
And your relation to the case?
We're the architects that developed the master plan for the project, both originally and the most recent update.
And tell us a little bit about your educational background.
Sure. My background is as an architect, 6 years of college and 27 years experience as an architect, working exclusively with churches. For the last 20 years, I've worked on probably over 65 to 70 church master plans.
And I'm a Bachelor of Arts in Architecture at Clemson University. I worked 5 years as a general contractor, and then past 7 years at LSRP in architectural design.
And you mentioned that LS3P has been involved in both the initial and current application in the Washington process. Can you tell us a little bit about the background and the current application?
Sure.
Yeah, so about 3 years ago, we started on a reimagining of the existing master plan. And it was really a genesis of an older master plan. We assisted the church with the building of their current facility.
Maybe help if I may take a minute just to explain what is a master plan and what is not a master plan. Maybe we can walk you through what is there on the side as well as what's planned. Maybe a good time maybe to just walk through it, or you just let's see here. We're into a lot of information here. Maybe I can just take a moment to explain to you what we're trying to do accomplish with the master plan. But for us, a master plan is really that long-term vision to develop the property. It's basically we work with the church early on. We go through a process of listening, visioning, working with them to determine what it is they want to accomplish on the property. And then we use that, develop it into what we call the master plan, to basically a site plan showing the full build out of the site. And it's key to know that that's a long-term plan. It's what we call in phases, which means it's in multiple steps, which means it happens over time. It could be 12 to 20 years before all of it's built out. But we look at it as a long-term plan. It's mainly for assistance in planning future phases, so that when we do plan the next phase, or when we plan what we're doing now, we don't put it in the way of what we want to do in the future. So it's that way of growth into the future pattern. We look at it as a development tool. We look at it as just an assistance to that. It's not a detailed plan in terms of very little design work that happens with each phase, but it is an overall plan for how we develop the property. And a lot of it comes from, the basis of it is from the vision the church has for that property. Again, we've done many of these over the years, and they really each focus on what the church wants to do. And just to speak to Five Stone's vision for this property, it really was about how we come onto the site and how we develop the property, where there's not a clear cut, just completely take everything down, not open nothing but parking lot and buildings. If you notice, if you're to the site, there's actually an approach road takes you back to the property, so it really sits back off the property, and there's that preparation as you walk onto the site from the road, it prepares you for eventually entering into worship. So there's that thought into both the outside spaces and the inside spaces. And there was really very careful thought as to how much of the site was developed, how much it was left green, how much of it was restored to outdoor green spaces and usable spaces that could be used for growth and church activities. One thing to mention too is when we first did the master plan, we originally did not have that adjacent property. There was 8 acres that was purchased, about 5 years ago? 3 to 5 years ago. And so before that, we were, again, limited in what the site was. And as we actually looked at, again, when we first did the development of the site, and we'll show you some images here in a minute, but we looked at that development and that growth. That part was added later, partially because of what we were looking to do originally would not fit on the site. When we looked at expanding it, it just was really not a good use of the overall site.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
Is that appropriate this time?
Sure.
What date did you start getting involved with Five Points?
2013.
And approximately what was the date when you had the proposed plan completed? Was it back in 2013?
The original?
Yes.
The original plan was done as part of the 2013 project. And then we did an update 4 years ago, and then just this recent one 2 years ago.
And Vaughn, what was the date of the application?
I haven't been sworn in yet, but
Do you want me to say that?
I mean,
Can I catch you with something in your mouth? Sorry.
that's right.
Yes, please sworn in.
Chief Whitley.
Do you swear that the evidence that you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do. The date of the application was August 6th
Of this year.
of this year for the application before this evening.
With the slide deck, I think,
Yeah, just,
has to spin it. Is that
Next slide.
correct?
go ahead, next slide, please.
As far as the slide, yeah. Thank you.
All right, well,
Sure. So here is what you see now, it's the existing conditions. And you can see the master plan has been ghosted out in white, so you can really see the existing paving coming forward, the existing structures, and the existing retention ponds. And to the top right hand of the screen is the parcel that we recently added to incorporate into the 33 acres total.
next slide, please.
And if you see in purple, that is the amount of square footage that is allowed under the current CUP. And you can see additional parking to service that additional square footage.
Next slide, please.
And the full build out, the full master plan with the future that's not been approved and included. And so if you notice, we, in our early stages of this version of the master plan, tried to maintain a good buffer around the site between the property line and buildings for pavement. And we also endeavored to keep that nature that you get now when you drive into the site as it meanders through the trees. We wanted to keep that character with an additional entrance as well as when you come into the site, you're in the future, you'd be able to arrive at a green space between the church buildings and the school buildings. And so you have these two worlds that are brought together in a celebration of green space, and the parking is encapsulated within the building so that it's not pushed to the periphery. It allows for decent flow, which I'm sure we'll speak to later. And again, it accomplishes all of the programmatic functions that the church had envisioned for the long-term purpose of the site.
Will we be getting a copy of this document?
Of the slideshow? Yeah. We have electronic copies of the slideshow. Is that right? Thank you.
So that was back in 2013, or that was before 2014?
The design started, I think,
It started in 2013, went through 2014, 2015, 2015 is
I'm sorry, when did the church open? Let me ask that question.
2015.
2015, so the church opened in 2015. And the original design showed the existing church that we see now, plus an addition that has already been approved.
Yes, there was a CUP approved for 60,000 square feet plus an existing 6,000 square foot house to remain.
And what was the approximate date of this design, where it expands into the adjacent property and adds all the other additional structures?
That was a 2019 design, and then it kind of got slowed down, of course, from the pandemic.
And the original CUP was what, 60,000?
6,000 square feet plus 60,000 square feet of new construction plus an existing 6,000 square foot house to remain.
And how much is currently built?
20,000? 20,000 plus the 6,000 square foot house.
Did you go back?
Go back a couple slides.
The adjacent property that was purchased is.
If you look to the right, see basically where the road is, everything to the right of the road, entry road, is the new property.
Okay, except for the way, which is a different.
Yes, that is not owned by the church.
Okay.
Let me make sure I've got my figures right. This map consists of 60,000 square feet plus the 6,000 square foot house.
That's existing. The next slide is the CUP that shows the 60,000. Next slide. Yeah, that shows that the brighter purple is not built yet. What we call the existing color there is kind of a funny purple. Okay. A good age color. And then the parking to the left is not built yet either.
Is that parking area to the left cleared?
That's been graded this month.
Then if you can go forward another slide to the green, yeah. The new buildings, the new structures. Let's go ahead. How many total square feet?
I think that's the 140 counting the 6,000 square foot house. So that's roughly 130 of new construction. Well, beyond the 60,000, so 70,000 additional square feet.
I'll provide a little bit of context for why the church might want to revise or update their master plan, even though there's 60,000 square feet approved, why it's still a good idea to proceed with updating master plan as we propose.
Sure. Could you stand up so we can hear the question?
I asked why, if they could provide some context as to why that church might go about updating or revising the master plan, even though there's 60,000 square feet that's already been approved.
But the church, when we re-engaged it, especially again having additional property, the church again re-engaged with us, and really the emphasis for that was mostly the school. I think originally the original church vision was brand new church, get to the site, and then again that was as far as the division went. Let's just get, when you're a brand new church, you got to have worship, you have to have education, fellowship, parking, all that has to happen on site. So just getting all that onto the site was really the primary focus. To get that master planned out and developed into the initial master plan was the original focus. And as the churches started to grow and people were coming in and the vision grew with the church, the idea of adding the K-12 school became a part of that new vision. And so again, we revisited the master plan with them. We actually looked at it before they bought the 8 acres, and that's when we made a decision together that the current site could not support the school because we ended up clear cutting the entire site, and that was not part of the church's vision. We wanted to still maintain the character of the site, which led to the acquisition of additional 8 acres that allowed us to expand The master plan is the way you see here, which allows for the building to be spread out and have that natural growth to it, and still maintain the green space as well.
And this design was made public to the public back in 2019, is that correct? Where there was public meetings for this design? And you may not be the appropriate person to ask, but
I'm not sure how the church, if it was presented, I know it was presented to the church, but I don't know again how it was presented.
that'll come up later in the presentation.
Yes, sir.
Yes, ma'am.
So your original vision, so like slide back, was more condensed before the
Yes,
purchase of the 8 acres?
we did not have that. We just had that piece that you see there, which is expanding.
And then, so there's no change to this basic footprint that's in the purple with the purchase of the 8 additional acres?
There was
You said spread out, that's what I was like.
we modified the footprint there, it's still within the square footage. The original master plan was all one big building. And again, as we developed the character of the space, we realized having more of a character to it, fit within the site, and break it up more in the smaller pieces, fit better with the site.
So you weren't involved in the purchase of the land?
No.
So you were running after they purchased the land?
We did a master plan that led to the realization we needed more property. And then once they bought the property, we did the new master plan as well.
And you took the approved square footage and just spread it over
Yes,
the
ma'am.
property. Okay, thank you.
Can you tell me the total acreage of the site and the total acreage that would be built out that you're requesting?
I know the total acreage is, I think, 33 acres, and you were looking at some of those numbers.
Yeah, so approximately
But in terms of how much is developed,
undeveloped 80%. So,
80% for green space. Well, we did the calculations. I think we're in at 70 to 80% of the whole site is green space or undeveloped.
But how many square feet are at the end of this master plan?
Oh, the square footage, there's 141,000 square feet, including the 6,000 square foot existing building.
Just so I understand your question, was it how many acres are going to be developed versus how many will be undeveloped?
No, just how many acres was the site total, and then what was the total build out of building square feet wise?
Okay.
And then we give out the total acreage now, including the 8 acres, is 33 acres.
that's correct.
And when you say 78% green space, are you including parking in the green space or not?
Only the islands.
So anything that's been paved or
That's
built
all,
on?
all that impervious surfaces not counted.
Council, have any additional questions?
Any additional questions, council? None of this
Is
time.
there any additional information that you guys would like to share in relation to this application?
I can't think of it.
Followed by any more?
Council, one other question before Mr. Dixon sits down. With the original CUP plan, did that include preschool? Or the preschool?
I believe so. Yes, I believe so.
Okay.
Yeah, the K-12 school was not part of that, but the preschool they had was part of that.
Okay. Thank you.
Do you swear that the evidence that you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God.
I do.
Mr. Mark, name and your address for the record?
Yes, my name is Eddie Moore with McAdams. We are a land development design firm assisting the Five Stones. My address is 3430 Torrington Way, Suite 110 in Charlotte. And I'm the Director of Planning and Entitlement for McAdams for the Charlotte region.
And what's your relation to this case?
We're doing the civil design work as part of this development, and we also did the boundary survey for the additional 8 acres.
Will you explain to council a little bit about what civil design work entails?
It's definitely, we have the architecture aspect and then the civil design. We basically design everything outside of the buildings. So we do not design the buildings themselves. We work on grading the property, the water utilities, the stormwater work as well. So it's definitely we'll do design of the parking lots to make sure that the surface areas pitch properly in appropriate locations, and the stormwater is collected from the stormwater facilities as well.
And give a little bit of background about your experience in general.
Yes, I have 28 years of land use experience. I'm a certified planner, the American Institute of Certified Planners, 12,000 of us in the U.S. And we have the entitlements group, land entitlement group from McAdams, both in the public sector and private sector, and also for the developer.
Did you work with not only the initial phase of the church, but also with the addition, or did you only work with the addition?
Only with the addition. We came in 2019. Okay. Yes, sir.
Explain a little bit about how your involvement with Five Stones application specifically is with President.
Yes, we started. We can kind of run through the slides. We kind of go through those. The next slide. The next 10 slides are actually the 10 pages of the conditional use permit plan that you do have, and this slide is the general overall build out of the plan itself that shows the overall design of the site within its entirety. We did gray out the parcel with the buildings that are to be developed and added all the parking. Sorry, I'm trying to get all these laser pointer here. I think there's one up here. And what we did several things that we had to do as part of the submittal process. We had to perform a preliminary stormwater analysis and also a preliminary grading analysis for the site. And with the site that's existing, there are 4 existing detention facilities or stormwater facilities that have been built onto the site. And even with the addition of what you see in this area, the church back with this first phase, those ponds were built out to accommodate a lot of the additional impervious surface that the site will have. But we had to add 2 additional stormwater facilities to accommodate the development that is along the 8-acre piece that was brought into the assemblage, and then also for this portion of the development, since there's a creek that actually runs through the property at this location. So we have come up with the plan itself. In addition to that, what we have to look at is potential landscaping. So we're showing a conceptual landscaping plan as part of it. As mentioned, a lot of the trees will be kept on the property. There are 3 points of the property I would like to point out. The bottom portion of the property as a condition, a voluntary condition. Five Stones is agreeing to put a 800-foot linear wood 6-foot fence in this area. One thing you can't really see, we did add some dimensions of our closest neighbors, and there's a house that is to the east, planned south, and it's about 450 feet away. Another area that we do have is planned north, which is to the right of the site, and this is a supplemental planting area. That'll be in between this property owner and the gymnasium and the parking and the new stormwater pond. That's about 145 feet from the existing house to that building. And the third supplemental planted area is to the west, or the planned north of the property. And we have, it's about 205 feet from this corner of the building to the existing dwelling that's here. And as you can see, the supplemental planted area will wrap around a good portion of the new buildings and also some of the parking area that you do see. And I'll kind of run through the slides. I know there's a lot of information here. We'll kind of run through. There were 10 pages as part of the packet. In addition, we did have a preliminary stormwater analysis that ran all the calculations, also the modifications that we are proposing here. Next slide, please.
Mr. Ward, can we stop there for just 1 second? Because you mentioned the pond.
Yes.
Did I understand you correctly that there's 4 retention ponds that are on site now?
Yes.
And with the addition of 70,000 more square feet, gross square feet, you're adding 2 additional retention ponds?
Yes.
Okay.
Next slide, please. This is our development standards as part of the conditional use permit. And a lot of the questions that you did have about the breakdown of the square footage that's of the proposed buildings, that's included in this document. And it'll run with the use permitted as conditions and also other notes associated with the permit itself. Next slide, please. And the next several slides are provided by LS3P. So what they showed, we included that into our slides. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. And here are some renderings, some example renderings of the school, of the chapel and event space, the signage that's existing that'll be duplicated on the site, and some lighting. Next slide, please. And talked about our neighbors, the distances between. This was an exhibit to show the existing grading as to what the buildings will be in relation to our closest neighbors and the distances in between those and the existing trees that will be preserved and then the supplemental trees that will be added. Next slide, please. This is our grading plan. That was part of the conditional use permit. So it's the same site plan that shows some of the grading. Next slide, please. This is the stormwater pond. We had to add some additional information of plantings as part of the 2 new ponds. Next slide, please. And this is our Union County Public Works sketch plan. It's a step in the process where we have to have sketch plan approval by Union County Public Works, and this is the plan that was submitted to Union County Public Works and approved, and we added that as part of our 10th page to the conditional use permit plan. And that concludes the slides and the submittal information. We work on to be glad to answer any questions.
So you said Union Works, you submitted this plan and they approved it?
Well, when I say approved, that they have reviewed the connections that we are proposing to the existing water and sewer infrastructure is that they did not guarantee capacity as part of that. The plans, the development plans have to be approved. So we're not even at that point yet. It's basically a little serve letter that Union County Public Works will serve water and sewer to the site.
Some of the details that I've learned, the dotted blue line that goes around the perimeter of the property are the setbacks.
The heavy dash line is the property line
Right.
It's
But just inside that, there's a dotted blue.
yes,
line.
yes, sir. You'll see that as it runs through. This is the actual setbacks that are associated based off the yards. So the front has a 75-foot.
And based on what I see here, there will be nothing built inside the setbacks?
Correct.
So to add to that, Mr. Moore, the 800-foot fence, is it going to be on the property line? Or
It'll be we can work with the neighbor. We want to commit at least that type of screening, a 6-foot privacy fence. And the location, it'll be behind the property line or it'll be into the property, which will give the neighbor the most screening possible. That location will be chosen.
Put on your property?
Yes.
Not to have additional questions.
Any additional questions at this time?
So, Mr. Moore, will the stormwater plan as proposed by Adams accommodate the stormwater runoff for the proposed development?
Yes, it will. And even I mentioned before, the existing facilities, they were sized for additional development for the church. So those 4 ponds do not have to be retrofitted in any fashion. So the plantings that are in place, they will remain as they are. It will just be the two proposed stormwater ponds for residential areas that will be needed.
We require annual stormwater pond reports. Have you received those from past times?
Cannot speak authoritatively to that at the moment without having prepared.
Nice dodge.
There have been stormwater reports from Five Stones received by the village in the past. Yes, I do not know for certain at this moment about.
Can I ask for that follow-up to make sure that their reports have been submitted and they're compliant?
The village has been keeping track of each entity that has stormwater annual inspection requirements, and so we do have a record of who has done so and who has not.
Thank you, Bob.
Didn't mean to put you on the spot on those.
I'm not the one that keeps up with that. So I don't.
Not at this time.
Thank you very much.
Covenant Works.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, your name?
Alex Herring.
H-A-R-I-N-G?
H-E-R-R-I-N-G.
2 R's?
Yes, ma'am. I believe.
Address?
4927 Waxhaw Farms Road.
It's called Covenant Works.
Yes, ma'am.
Put your left hand on the Bible. Do you swear that the evidence that you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes. My name is Alex Herring. Address 4927 Waxhaw Farms Road.
What's your relationship to this application?
So I'm one of the owners of Covenant Works, and we're the landscape management company for 5 Seasons.
I'm sure you can put some marks.
Yes. This is our proposal for the 3 areas for additional screening, not including the 4th area where the fence will be. But we propose planting additional trees, grass growth and pine trees, and then also additional lower shrubs, and then building berms where the areas are where it's a larger area.
Will these plantings be done at current ground level, or will there be a berm added as well?
There'll be a berm where we're able. The berm we're proposing is a 5-to-1 ratio, so 5 feet wide for every 1 foot tall. So where we're able to, we'll be building a berm and then planting on top of the berm.
And are those areas defined anywhere?
Yes, in the previous speaker heat. So there's 3 areas: the northwest, southeast, and north central boundary.
So those will be additional plantings, potentially a berm.
Yes, a berm if the berm allows. The northwest boundary, southeast boundary, and then the west central boundary. The east boundary is the 4th area, but that's where we build.
One more. Keep on. All the way back.
Keep taking one more.
That's what we get for leaving the room.
So it's the areas that are the dotted, heavy dotted areas on the top and on the right.
Yes, the 3 previous areas at the north, east of Bethel.
So 5-to-1 ratio berm plus additional plantings will be trees and shrubs. So something high and something.
Yes, sir. Yeah, so there'll be trees and then shrubs for cover. So.
Just for purposes of clarity, would you identify on the map that's coming on screen, and then sort of walk through each area with us?
So this is the eastern. That's where the fence will be built, and then from there we have this area, and this is the northeast boundary, and then this is also the northwest boundary. And so the findings we're proposing are in the northwest boundary. We are looking at screens that include 3 different types of smaller shrubs, and then evergreens. And then in the southeastern and south boundary, that's where we'll be looking to plant the larger loblolly pines, which are the faster growing pine trees. And then in those areas, we'll be looking at doing a staggered planting, so 1 row the initial year, and then 3 or so years down the road doing an additional row, so to provide trees that'll be growing at different heights to provide maximum screening for sight lines from the surrounding properties.
What sort of expertise do you and just Covenant Works have historically in providing sort of screening?
So my background is I'm an NC State graduate. I graduated from agricultural business management degree, and I've been in the landscape industry since 2012.
Have you been involved in similar projects?
Yes, we've done screenings before. We've done plantings at schools and other additional screenings for the properties.
And that screening that will be green year round?
It will have parts of it will be green year round. We'll have the evergreens will be year-round, the shrubs will be green year-round, and then also the pines, they retain their needles year-round.
Can you,
Oh, that's fine.
I was going to ask, could you explain why the specific species of plants were chosen for this location?
Well, we chose loblolly pines because of how quickly they grow. So they initially they'll be height around 8 feet or so, but then they can grow up to 2 feet per year. So we try to pick plants like that for their quick growth before screening. And then also they have their mature height is the amount of screening we'll provide.
In your professional opinion, do you believe that the screening that's been proposed, Exhibit 1, would adequately buffer and mask any concerns related to sound or light emanating from the proposed development?
No, I believe this would be adequate screening for the surrounding properties to help with sightlines and also the emission.
What is the planting height of standard trees that you're
The standard trees, that'll be in the 7 to 8 foot range when we plant them.
And let's say 3 to 5 years down the road, how tall do you anticipate it to be?
We anticipate 2 years of growth per year.
Based on your experience, what is the expected replacement rate? We know that 100% won't survive, so what the ratio are you expecting for replacement?
As far as I put out there, if they die, it's typically a low rate. I know it does happen from disease or just from the planting. I don't have a specific rate. I mean, it would be very low, and things can be replanted or replaced as needed if it were to happen.
So I understand you correctly that within the design of the screening that you guys took into account the sound and lighting and how the screening would affect that?
Yes, sir. Yes, I mean primarily it's for sight lines from the surrounding properties, but the trees and shrubs they also help with sound and also light at nighttime.
And how do you qualify or quantify that?
As far as a ratio of what they
Dave, probably step in here. I think I can ask the same question in a different way.
Okay.
There's another rep that I think the gentleman that already spoke. Does he know the height of the lighting structures in the parking lot? The gentleman who did the engineer.
I think we have another expert who can speak to that.
Ryan Sutherland. Do you know the height of the lights in the parking lot?
I do not offhand.
I think we have another expert who can speak to that.
Was that kind of along the lines of what you were concerned about?
No, I just wondered how you qualify. How much? And Alex, I'm asking a simple question because I've got a simple mind, okay? But how do you qualify, what a loblolly pine, how much light or sound that will absorb?
Yes, sir. And that's something we could get back to it. This is just the initial proposal that we have. So if that's something that there's more information needed for the on design section.
Sure, yeah, that'd be good. Thank you.
Councilmember, are you asking in terms of how much sound or light a single loblolly pine might?
Not a loblolly pine specifically,
right.
but if I understood the statement, the buffering would absorb
right.
some of the sound and some of the lighting.
Right.
Did I misunderstand that?
No, I'm just making sure I understand your request.
My question is, how do you qualify that?
Okay. So how do you quantify the amount of maybe percentage of decrease?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Just making sure I understand that.
Okay.
Doesn't have any further questions at this time. Is there any other information you'd like to share regarding this? Thank you, sir. I'm going to call Mr. Andrew Hill. See you soon.
Andrew Hill.
I'll get this in a minute. When you have to
I'll tell you
start
again in a
down.
second.
Right. Do you swear that the evidence that you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
You state your name and address.
Yeah, my name is Andrew Hill. I work with the company CESO. I'm Senior Director of Land Planning and Landscape Architecture. Address is 4601 Park Road, Charlotte. And I am also a former resident of Lawson, just down the road from this project site. And I've done a lot of projects in the area. I am a registered landscape architect and do a lot of landscape architecture and master planning. Some of the projects that people in the room may be familiar with, Sun City Carolina Lakes, that was done by us. Treetops, just down Van Wyck Road, from Sun City Carolina Lakes. We did that one as well. Aesthetics and vision and theme and things along those lines are of the utmost importance to us. And those are a lot of the things that we work on a lot of the projects and master plan communities that we work on.
Schaefer, Marcus, to you.
Thank you. Cheryl, can you do that bond slide?
Which one?
Keep going. Okay, right there.
That one?
That's good. Oh, no, next
Nope.
one.
That one.
Yes. So a lot of the
Just a problem. Do you recognize Exhibit 2, sir?
I do.
What is Exhibit 2?
Exhibit 2 is my bio.
Okay. And again, I think you spoke to a lot of this, but you have background expertise in land planning and landscape architecture with CESO.
That is correct.
CESO, is that?
That is, yeah, that's correct.
And how long have you been with CESO?
I've been with CSO for 2 years.
Okay. And how long have you been engaged in landscape planning, or land planning and landscape architecture services?
For a long time. Since 1995.
Fair enough.
Yes.
Fair enough.
And my title is Senior Director, but that's not because of my age. That's because of my experience.
I'd submit Mr. Hill as an expert in land planning and landscape architecture services.
I mean, if they're, I don't think they need to make a motion or anything on that. You presented if they're willing to hear testimony from them. I think
Fair enough.
that's implicit.
As you were, Mr. Hill, before I interrupted you.
All right, that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm going to use the next series of slides just to talk to you a little bit about how well the master plan fits in to the community, how well the master plan fits into the lay of the land. A lot of the slides that you're about to see, you probably would have liked to have seen some of those slides a little bit sooner. When Spencer and Brian were talking, they were talking about a lot of the things that you're about to see right here. So everybody can see the master plan. Everybody's familiar with the master plan in the center of the slide. And we'll start to go through these, but I wanted to utilize this slide to show also the close proximity to Cuthbertson High School and Middle School, just to show exactly how close those are. And that's another significant site used in the area. Next slide, please. So this slide right here shows the property boundary. We've discussed that. Like I said, that's a lot clearer than some of the slides that you may have seen already, so that's probably very helpful. Next slide, please. The next slide, council can probably see that quite well. I'm not sure if everybody can in the audience, but that shows the 50-foot buffer. And as you can see, inside the 50-foot buffer, there's not only does that area need to be understood, but there's a lot of significant tree save in that area that will exist and remain. Next slide, please. This slide right here shows undeveloped area. So it's in addition to the 50-foot buffer. We've worked with a lot of clients in the past that have tried to limit how much tree save they have. The church has gone above and beyond to try to create more tree save, to create more of a natural environment so that the master plan does fit well with the lay of the land, the current surroundings, existing vegetation, and things along those lines. That shows exactly right there the amount of undeveloped area. And the significance and size of that. Next slide, please. The green areas here show landscaped area or green space. You can see, again, a significant amount. Next slide, please. And then this shows a combination of the undeveloped area and the landscaped area. I think there was a question before, maybe to Spencer, about what percentage this was. And again, this is 70 to 80% of undeveloped or green space that would be part of the overall 33 acres. So you can see how the architects have done a great job with the central parking area, and then a lot of inward-facing design that creates a lot of green space around the perimeter. Next slide, please. This shows some of the land uses that are around the area. I don't need to remind you guys that worship centers or churches are part of that can fit in the residential district, but you can see the yellow areas identify residential properties surrounding the church. The blue area along the eastern property line is ministry. The top left is ministry again. That's another church, as I'm sure everybody's familiar with. And then the orange area on the southern part and the orange area to the left is common open space. The area along the bottom on the southern part is all existing vegetation. The area on the lower left, that again is orange, is an amenity center with pool and parking lot. Next slide, please. With the next set of slides, what we wanted to do was maybe show you some similar uses within the town that might not have as big of a tree save, as big of a natural area where buffers may be more in conflict than what we're trying to do with the project that we're working on. As you can see here with Newtown Elementary, there's a residential area that abuts the project. Actually abuts the parking lot and the play areas. There's little to no buffer in that area. I wanted to show you this aerial image, and then we've got a few more slides that will show that in a little bit more detail. If you could go to the next slide, please. So this is as you enter into the project, and you can see on the left-hand side, there are some parking lot lighting, and then if you see a little bit further into the distance, directly adjacent to the houses are a number of basketball hoops and basketball courts for play area for the school. If you go to the next slide, please. And then the modulus, those are in direct sight from all of the homes that are adjacent to the property with little to no buffering. Next slide, please. This is another one that everybody is familiar with, just a short distance from here, Silent Presbyterian Church. You can see along the eastern boundary, again, adjacent to a residential neighborhood. The ball diamond right there is obviously a high active use. If you go to the next slide, please. You can see on the ball diamond, limited amount of buffering, but significant size ball diamond lights for evening games. If you go to the next slide, please. And as you can see, the lights are all the way around the field, and this is an older version of the light adjacent to a residential neighborhood that doesn't have the same level of light shading or protection from surrounding areas that some of the light fixtures and some of the design that would occur with the church project. Next slide, please. This again shows a little bit more of the lighting that is adjacent to the residential neighborhood, some of the gaps in the buffer. Next slide, please. This is an aerial view of Auberbrook. You can see in the center of the image, that is the Auberbrook Gym. And it is directly adjacent to the residential neighborhood with little to no protection, little to no distance. The parking lot under the Wood Christian Academy is directly abuts the residential homes. If you go to the next slide, please. This is a photo of the gym, and you can see the property line is where the fence runs. So all of those trees are actually on the residential property. There really isn't any buffer. There's definitely nothing that would screen that building from adjacent residential homes. Next slide, please. Parking lot, again, same fence. This is a school pickup as well. So there'll be lines, and there'll be plenty of cars in the school pickup line directly adjacent to our residential home. Next slide, please. Much of the same. Next slide again. And you can see the parking lot and how this is the parking lot that's actually adjacent to the worship center, so it's even further away and still can see the residential home. Next slide, please. Zero buffer with the wood fence on Arbor again. Next slide, please. Wesley Chapel Elementary. Again, another project that has little to no buffer. Let's see if this. There we go. So this is actually an older aerial. So as you all probably are well aware, there's actually a roadway now that comes in and around. The roadway that comes in here is directly adjacent to all of these homes. There's existing vegetation on the home side. There isn't any vegetation that actually appears as if it's on the school site. So the road comes in, pickup traffic will come in and around and sit in this area right here. You'll see on some of the next slides that this home right here is directly adjacent to the school parking lot. There's a fence that's been installed along this buffer, but the school basically cleared all the way up to the property line. If you go to the next slide, please. This is what you can see along that buffer. Next slide. You can, obviously the residential homes can easily be seen. They can easily see the school property. They can see the cars lining up. Next slide, please. This is the home that I mentioned that was directly adjacent to the asphalt. So they've got an outdoor patio area. There's a hardscape area. All of the cars are lining up in this area. There are cars parked in this area, and that home is directly adjacent to it with zero buffer, not even a fence. Next slide, please. And then this is the new road that comes in from around that I had identified that comes into the car pickup lane. And you can see the fence along the one side, but as to the left of the building, as it goes around the building, there's no split in between the homes and the drive lane. Next slide, please. Cuthbertson and Middle, as you know, just a short distance away from the church site. The modular units right here in this location, and they are on display for the homes in Walson. Next slide, please. So you can see this. Actually, could you back up one more time? So this road right, this is a vehicular pathway that goes around the back right here. So there are bollards that prevent some just regular folk from driving back there, but this is wide enough and is intended to be vehicular access to go back around the side of these modular units. If you could go to the next one again. And you can see, here's the road right here as it goes around the back, and then these are the modular units that are on display from the homes. Next slide, please. And then this is the final series, but this is the Wesley Chapel Dogwood Park. I apologize, the aerial's a little bit dark, but you can see the homes down here on the bottom, on the southern side of the park. And then here is the parking lot. So directly along the property line of the park and directly along the property line of all of these homes is a walking trail and pedestrian pathway. So if you go to the next slide, you can see the pathway right here. And this is the residential property right adjacent. Next slide, please. And then this is the last one that just shows a little bit of shrubbery adjacent to the residential homes with the walking path nearby. So, like I had said early on, before you saw any of those slides, a lot of the clients that we work with will go above and beyond to do special things, to keep tree safe, to create a campus environment. I think that the church site does that. You can see a lot of the sites in and around the area. Even clients that we've worked with in the past don't go to those lengths. And what that represents is how well and harmoniously the church site does actually fit into the area. And when you're driving along Cuthbertson Road, you can't even see the site, so that kind of says it right there. You guys have any questions?
So the examples that you gave, do you know when those particular things were built?
I do not have specific. No, I do not have specific dates of when those were built. I think the park is fairly new. Some of the other ones obviously have been around for a while.
I think some of them pre-existed subdivisions.
Yes.
Everyone has.
But it would be helpful to understand that they were, whether or not they were built under the appropriate codes that are compliant with whatever was approved when they were built. So it's an apples to apples comparison in terms of expectations.
Okay.
Did those other properties he highlighted as a difference comply with their expectations at the time they were built? So that we understand if something was built in unincorporated Union County, later became Wesley Chapel, the standards are different.
Certainly, I may be wrong on this. I don't know that any schools have been approved by the village since it was incorporated. I may,
No, but
it's
some
not
of the
testimony.
schools, if you compare we could have a list of when the schools were built compared to the neighborhoods around here. What was there first, the school or the neighborhood?
Or the adjacent properties. Because some of them we know, Siler's a historic building.
Yeah. Absolutely, and I think, even if the code was not in place for them to follow, those are just showing some examples of where there is no buffer as compared to significant size buffer, just so it's a visual that you can see.
Just to go to that point, what is it your opinion, based on your expertise, that the buffer that's being proposed for the proposed development by Five Stones meets or exceeds the standards of the ordinance, as well as the buffer that's in place for similar uses around the community?
I would say that it exceeds.
And do you agree that the Five Stones proposal would not introduce incongruous land use or incompatible with development scale or intensity?
I do agree, yes.
And do you agree that the location and character of the use, if developed according to the plan submitted and approved, if approved, will be in harmony with the area in which it is to be located?
I do.
Councilman.
So the questions you just asked about being in harmony, that's with the look, the building, the landscaping? Is that what you're answering to? Or are you answering to when it's in functional use?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Is it harmonious from the look, the feel, the aesthetics of it with surrounding areas, just from the buildings and the plan? Or is that when it's functioning?
I'm reading, Councilman.
No, but I'm asking what he was answering.
Sure, I'm just reading directly from the special.
Yeah, that's all, what he's
Yeah,
considering.
from an aesthetic perspective, it's difficult to determine from a use perspective when it's functional.
Council, have any additional questions at this time?
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Still want to take a moment, or you still go strong? This would be a good time if you want to take a break. No, okay, fair. Call Michael Wickwan from DRG.
What's your name? Michael Wickline, Design Resource Group. You wrote it down.
Do you swear that the evidence that you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do. I'm Michael Wickline, Design Resource Group.
assisting Fostones with the traffic engineering for the required TIA by NCDOT and MSTA.
Could you repeat your name and company?
Michael Wickline, WICKLINE, at Design Resource Group, or DRG for short.
Thank
The mark is in 301. What is Exhibit 3?
Say that one more time.
What is Exhibit 3?
Exhibit 3 is a resume that was prepared for an RFQ for an additional school site in Charlotte. It was a charter school, and it just shows some of my relevant experience and what I've done in my 7.5 years at Design Resource Group, where I'm principal owner.
And you are a PE, is that right?
That is correct. And it's a professional engineer recognized by the state of North Carolina and
Okay. And what do you do specifically with DRG?
I head up the transportation and traffic group along with Randy Goddard, another PE, and between the two of us we do traffic studies, parking studies, signal warrant analysis, all sorts of traffic and transportation engineering throughout North Carolina and South Carolina, including commercial, residential, industrial, and school-related projects.
And specifically with respect to school traffic studies, what sort of qualifications does DRG have?
So in order to perform for any engineering work for the state of North Carolina, you have to be on the pre-approved list, which our consulting firm is, Design Resource Group Partners. In addition to do school studies per the new General State Statute, there's an additional qualification through MSTA, which is municipal school assistance or transportation assistance, and you have to go through and be on a secondary approval to be able to provide the traffic studies through them. Because along with the new state statute, effectively NCDOT is a state law that a government agency isn't typically or cannot require any school, public or private, to perform roadway mitigation work or install, acquire right of way, install any improvements unless reimbursement is made. So because there's a level of funding that comes from the state agency, it has to go through MSTA, who then does thorough reviews and make sure that their top priority is that the school will not impact the safety or the flow of the existing roadway. So when they're looking at it, our document is more of a vessel or a planning document that NCDOT reviews and ultimately has the final say-so as to what they're going to fund and what they're going to require to be built, whether they build it or whether the school would build it.
And I'd submit Mr. Wickline is an expert in the areas of traffic engineering and transportation planning and school traffic studies and analysis. And let me show you the market before, Mr. Wickline. And I'll ask if you recognize it before.
Yes, that is the traffic impact analysis, the final version that was submitted to NCDOT and MSTA. It was approved by NCDOT on 6/17 of this year.
And is that your seal, professional engineer seal on the front?
That is.
Can you walk us through what the Dodge study?
Yeah, so just a general basic understanding of what a traffic impact analysis is. Effectively, we take the existing roadway along with the existing traffic. We look at, for future years, we have to look at how traffic is going to interact. Because development doesn't come in overnight, so usually it's 2, 3, 4 years down the road. So we look at kind of a grand view for a future year and get a baseline for which we would anticipate any approved developments that have already been approved in the area. For example, if this accounts for the additional traffic from the Pfister property down the road and the improvements that they are anticipated to make. So we take that along with the growth rate for this site. We did a 3% compounded growth rate which was approved and set effectively by NCDOT in scoping. We provided the data. They agreed that 3% seemed reasonable. We get that to the future year. At that point, we take that no-build condition and we analyze it based on, in a program called Synchro, that will provide delay in the amount of seconds and LOS degrees based on where it falls. Typically, LOSD is considered acceptable by the state. Anything better than that is great. Anything worse, E to F start. E is kind of getting to heftier delays, where F would be pretty much unacceptable
When you
delays.
say LOS, sorry to interrupt you. Can you?
Level of service.
Thank you.
Yep. And so what we do is we get that baseline for the no-build without the site traffic. We add the site traffic, the anticipated site traffic, based on a calculator that's provided by NCDOT. They've done years and years of studies on all the different schools and compiled their own statistics for what they feel a school of a certain amount of students would generate traffic-wise on a network. We take that and assign it based on the distribution of the roadway with the existing traffic volumes, and we put that on top of all of that no-build traffic and measure the impact. So the purpose of a traffic study is not necessarily to fix all existing issues, but it's to measure and make sure that a development in a traditional sense would mitigate their impact of their development on the existing intersections.
I'm sorry, would you say that last part again?
Which part?
Just about
The traffic study, the purpose of a traffic study.
The purpose of a traffic study is to mitigate development's impact on the adjacent roadways and intersections. So NCDOT has a set of guidelines, and I believe that Wesley Chapel also adheres to those guidelines through their typical review process, that you're allowed, if there's a level of service drop, for example, between your no-build and build, you would have to mitigate to get that back to at least as good as no-build. And there's some other criteria, but that's just getting into the weeds. Effectively, it's all about the measured delay, and if that delay goes up so far, the level of service drops, mitigation, there's an impact that has to happen, so we have to suggest improvements that will get that back down to where we need to be. So in a traditional sense, for a private development, when we suggest something in a traffic study, so long as it mitigates and NCDOT agrees, that developer would be responsible for those improvements. For a school study, what ends up happening is we effectively submit recommendations to MSTA out in Raleigh, the district office as well. They review it and they come back and tell us whether they want us to test a different alternative, whether they want us to look at something else, or however the case may be. For this study, I think we went through 4 different iterations. So this is the final version, but it was submitted to NCDOT 4 separate times, reviewed with comments, looking at alternatives. We initially started off with an interim phase of 200 students with some recommendations. The second phase was going to bring the remaining 600 students for a total of 800. And of course, 800 students coming into the network really started to kind of bog things down. NCDOT wasn't convinced that the safety aspect would be there. So the option came back from NCDOT as a suggestion that they wanted to see what would happen if we split the bell schedule. So what we ended up doing is saying, instead of having all 800 students come at one time, these grades would be split in whatever way makes sense, K through 6, 6 through 12, whatever the case may be. And it's going to be 400 students arrive at one time, they leave, and then a minimum buffer of, I think it was either 30 or 45 minutes, somewhere, whatever they can make work, then the other 400 students would come in as well. And in addition to buffering between themselves, they also have to buffer between the bell schedules for the high school and middle school, so that these 400 students or the parents are not coming to drop off at the same time that the high school or middle school would be.
Question on the timeline. The date on this report says June 2021. When was the raw data accumulated?
In terms of traffic counts?
As far as traffic counts.
The traffic counts were actually accumulated in October of 2019. Now, the reasoning for that is that we were initially contacted by Five Stones to assist LS3P McAdams with reviewing the circulation plan, providing our consultation to figure out, we know what NCDOT wants to see in terms of circulation patterns. We talked about, having an ingress only and an egress only drive and circulation and the safety of pedestrians on campus. When we got to scoping, it was in the middle of the pandemic. Schools were closed. So NCDOT made the decision in a memo that came straight out of Raleigh from the state engineer that at this point they didn't want anyone collecting data because it wouldn't be viable. In that memo they stated that traffic counts up to 3 years old, I believe, would be eligible for use in a traffic study with acceptable growth. So we grew that by 3%. At the time, I believe we were working on this in 2020 when the initial submission was made to represent existing volumes. So we added some growth to that in order to account for that difference. And at the time, NCDOT, they stated it's not the best method at this point, but it's the best we have to go on because we don't know how long this shutdown is going to last. Initially, it was 2 weeks, and we all know what happened with that when schools finally went back into session.
Well, the reason I asked about the timeline is because of what we just talked about, the COVID factor, and how that affects your raw data, plus the existing traffic, plus the development that's happened already on Frederickson Road, plus the traffic that is being proposed, or the development that's being proposed, I should say. The Lawson subdivision entered a new phase, not to mention the library that's been approved and the new subdivision that's been approved. Is all that taken into account in the CIA traffic analysis?
So we have to go based on the time of scoping. And at the time of scoping, I believe it was only the district property that was included.
Now, what do you call it when you say district property? The encore development?
The senior living. That's just further down Huffington itself.
The Epcot development.
Okay. Yeah, so I believe that was what was included. Let me just double check that. Yeah, so it was the encore development was included. The trips from the senior family to townhomes on both sides was included and added throughout the network, or the study area that we had to look at.
But nothing about the proposed library on the other subdivision.
That's right. So it's assumed that the 3% growth rate should account for some of that. I'm not sure if it accounts for all of it or not. But again, at the time of submission of scope, those were not approved or they were not provided to us by Wesley Chapel to include it, nor NCDOT.
And you said that because of COVID, you went back. The acceptable way of doing the traffic analysis was to go back over the last 2 to 3 years.
Yes.
Do you know when on those 2 to 3 year traffic analysis the analysis was done? Was it done in the summer? Or was it done when school was in session?
The counts that I have put in here.
The counts that you used to make
October 29th while school was in session.
2017 through 2018 and 2016.
This was October 29th, 2019 is when the data that's in this traffic study was used, or was collected, and that's what was used for the analysis purposes. Now, I will state that sometimes you try to think of it as we're not accounting for all the traffic, but when you go to the base of what a TIA is, it's the delta, right? So how much worse is a specific development going to make, and what has to happen to mitigate that impact? So whether your base is 100 or whether it's 200 and you add, the delta is going to be the same because that increment goes up. It's only going to make it worse or at the same amount. So, for example, if you use, it's 100 and it goes to 50, it's a 50% increase. Typically, it's going to be about the same because it's all based on the LOS, not necessarily just the amount of traffic.
So just a clarification question. You said there was senior townhouses?
I don't know if the townhomes are senior.
I'm thinking about Epcot, but if that was there in 2019, it was already.
I'm talking about the David Weekly site that's just a little further down Cuthbertson. It's a Union County project.
Right, because you made a comment about having it approved by Wesley Chapel, and I'm like, put it in unincorporated versus the village.
But it still travels along the roadway, so we took it into account.
Right. But it was just your comment that not approved by Wesley Chapel, and like, I'm not familiar with what's in.
Gotcha.
I just operate. Thank you.
So really, that's kind of the baseline. At that point, we submitted the traffic study to NCDOT over the course of the 4 different reviews, and what we came out to, effectively NCDOT in May of this year, MSTA out of Raleigh provided their funding letter stating what they would be willing to fund at this point in terms of, in order to provide safe and reasonable access for the site and for Cuthbertson Road itself.
Is that funding letter contained in Exhibit 4?
Yes, it's the second page of the document. This came straight from NCDOT, MSTA. It's signed by the state traffic management engineer and was reviewed thoroughly processed. What you see on this sheet, which includes for Phase 1, a temporary traffic signal at the existing access on Cuthbertson, as well as a storage extension of the left turn lane that is planned by that, the same, whatever we're calling it, the Pfister development, the David Weekley development. They're currently on the books, and I believe they're slated to start construction this spring on a left turn lane or a right turn lane to split it from a combined lane to have a dedicated left and a dedicated right. I believe that is supposed to have 250 foot of storage as a part of this Phase 1 for the 200 students. That's going to get extended to 200 feet, or another 200 feet to 450. So those were the 2 improvements that came out of the Phase 1 analysis for 200 students. Now, NCDOT stated for Phase 2 that they may have a possible spot mobility study. I clarified this with them. What this means is, so long as the time frame allows, NCDOT will conduct the study to review to see if these improvements are necessary, and if necessary, they will install them. If the timeline of the school moves forward at a rate which NCDOT cannot receive the funding or can't get the study done, the developer will be responsible for installing these prior to the opening of Phase 2. So one way or another, all of these improvements will be in place. And what that actually entails, if you can go to the next slide, would be an eastbound right turn lane with 300 foot of storage and implement some additional signal phasing on Newtown so that anyone needing to go down to Cuthbertson is not waiting in the through lane to block that up and create additional delays, as well as removing the temporary signal at the existing drive, since it's an entrance only at this point, and adding it to the new egress only drive to pretty much eliminate the need for an off-duty officer to have to stand out in the roadway and in unsafe conditions. It's something NCDOT does not like to have out there, no matter the time of day or period. So when they can avoid that, they will, which is why on the safety aspect that traffic signal was approved.
And this report shows specifically the improvements that are being proposed or suggested, or the intersection. Has there been any discussion about improving the road itself?
No, because what that would come down to, it's going to still come from the same source at that point, which would be NCDOT. So if they were to approve that, they would have to provide the funding for that. So typically, as a part of schools, it's not necessarily pavement upgrades or repaving, mill and overlay, anything like that.
I don't mean repaving, I mean widening.
Widening from 2 lanes to 4 lanes, for example.
From 2 lanes to 3 lanes with a turn lane down the center.
No, so there was no discussion of that, especially along the frontage of this site, because if you'll notice, the westernmost drive, there is no turn lane into this site because that's going to be an egress-only drive. You can only turn out of that. So effectively what's going to happen is, if you can go back maybe 3 slides. So what's going to happen is, during the school peak, all of the parents are going to come in this route. They're going to snake through the school to provide adequate stacking on site to ultimately drop off at this location. and then they'll come here and they'll leave out. What this does is eliminates any conflicts internally to anyone turning across one another. It eliminates conflicts here on the roadway so that no one ever has to, wait for a left out or left in and have an additional conflict point. So
is there going to be any widening or turn lane installed in addition to what's already there?
No.
Or neither exit? Neither the entrance or the exit?
No.
Michael, if you will walk me through again why you determined a light would be needed at the egress, but not a light at the entrance?
Because at the entrance, there's already a turn lane. There's already a right turn lane. So the thought process, this is a free movement, right? If anyone's waiting to turn in here, this light will give them the gap that they need. So when this is stopped, letting these people out, there's a gap necessary to allow them to flow in. And the right turn has no conflict. It's just a straight shot in. So really, with the left turn lane there and this light here creating a gap condition, it wouldn't be necessary. Now, the reason why it's more necessary at this point is mainly due to the fact that the volume on Cuthbertson is high enough that without either an officer or a traffic signal, you can't get out. You wouldn't be able to get out. Where the amount of vehicles in a 30 to 45 minute period would not be able to get out, which would then cause queuing throughout the entire school and then spill back onto Cuthbertson. So in order to avoid delays on the Cuthbertson, we're trying to allow the school to hold as much of that stacking and as much of that queue on site so that there is no felt delay along Cuthbertson itself. And that's part of the reason for reducing the student count bell schedule from 800 down to 4 in that given period.
The left turn lane in, how many cars can stack into that?
Let's see, the existing turn lane, we measured out at around 100 feet. Typically, you would say you get about 25 foot of cars. Currently, it's around 4. With the implementation and how, with the phase 1, there was really no felt queue, and with the simulation runs that we got, there was no indication that storage needed to be extended, and NCDOT agreed with that and did not approve any type of extension for that term.
Can you give us some information about how you calculate stacking and queuing? What are the factors that go into that calculation?
So, from a general standpoint, NCDOT's NSTA calculator, which is what they use to calculate, again, the trip generation and what we add to the network. It also has a demand for an average demand of what they see fit for stacking. This is, again, through all of their statistics that are provided to us, that all we do on that spreadsheet is put in the amount of students, and everything else populates and comes out. And those are the items we're required to use for a traffic study purpose.
Did you factor in besides the school traffic, did you factor in church traffic, the daycare, anything like that?
So let me answer that question and then I'll get to that. So I just want to give a little more detail about the stacking. So with the stacking, NCDOT has their average demand. It's what you're going to see on an average day, a regular day. Then they have what we're required to meet, which is a 30% high demand. Let's talk snow day, something else where all the parents are coming at one time to pick up their kids. They need that additional demand. So what the site plans provide and what's required are actually, they vary, because what we're required to have for phase 1 is 1,125 feet of stacking on site. We're actually providing 1,520 as a part of phase 1. For phase 2, the 30% high demand is 2,221 feet, and we're providing 3,230 feet, so over 1,000 foot more than what's required because of how far we're able to take those back and snake through. So, in terms of, can you repeat your question, and then we can.
Well, my question was based on your analysis. Were you factoring in church traffic? Were you factoring in daycare traffic? Were you factoring in anything other than school?
No, because as far as we were concerned, as far as NCDOT was concerned, and as far as Village of Wesley Chapel is concerned, there had already been some type of TIA or study done for the church itself, including the expansion, which is where the improvements came.
And you didn't think that would be a factor?
Church traffic typically happens on Sundays and off-peak, and we look at and we're typically looking at school AM and PM peaks in terms of traffic studies themselves for school. In terms of the daycare, so that specific question we raised to NCDOT to verify, and their thoughts on the matter were, if at the time I believe we were talking about potentially, I'm not sure what the number, but it was higher than what it is now in terms of, it was greater than the 150 that currently got approved for the Stepping Stones program in the daycare. So NCDOT said, as long as that number of students does not exceed the maximum amount that come at any time in the bell schedule, which in this case it's either 200 for phase 1 or 400 for the full build, as long as it does not exceed that amount, that the roadway improvements that they recommended per their, for our TIA and per their funding letter should be able to accommodate that, because with the only exemption being that those Stepping Stone students must come, arrive and leave outside of any of those two bell schedules.
And who enforces the bell schedule for the church, school, for the daycare, or how do we know it's going to be complementary to the high school and middle school study?
NCDOT, MSTA enforces that, and typically if there are complaints along that, they get forwarded to them, they open their investigations, and then, because we've got a legal document here that's their funding letter that's per this TIA, per the information, they would be the ones to enforce that. I don't know what type of enforcement that would actually entail, but I know that they are the ones that look into that. And I can tell you from my personal experience that there have been times where schools were not adhering to their traffic management plan, and they're outside of bell schedule, wherever the case may be, where we got hired to go out to existing schools to observe traffic flow, make recommendations to figure out what they could be doing better to implement those. So, and in that case, it comes from whatever it may be, from anyone calling to complain or report that they don't think it's being done the right way, or whatever the case may be. But that would be, I believe, or maybe, I'm not sure if the Village of Wesley Chapel has something in place in order to kind of enforce that as well.
So the plan is to have K through 12 and no buses. This is all going to be parents dropping kids off.
I don't think there's any plans for buses, and if they intend to put buses in the future, the traffic study accounted for the most conservative cases at the time. So we weren't aware that there were going to be buses. So instead of assuming the best case where however many students were going to come in, we took the worst case in order to make sure that our recommendations were providing safe and reasonable access.
So I understood you to say that the TIA from the original conditional use approval was part of your baseline for DOT, saying that that had already been considered.
Yes.
That you didn't have to consider the normal church traffic and daycare.
Yes, because typically
that would have been covered in the original TIA.
Yes.
Is that a document we have?
We do.
And then based on that, they assume that's all in place at those levels, et cetera. You use this calculator based on number of students, put in your bell schedule to ensure you are meeting that level of service.
Yes.
Am I getting this stuff?
Yeah, that's the gist. And that was the big key there, is to minimize impact. It's going to take a lot of coordination on these bell schedules between the middle school and the high school and the new two bell schedules, so that there's a minimum of 30 minutes. I think NCDOT's requirement was a minimum of 30 minutes. They'd like to see 45 where possible.
45 minutes between each bell at any school?
Yes.
Okay, so there has to be 45 minutes from a bell at the church, and 45 minutes to the middle school, 45 minutes to high school, 45 minutes to the next church. So
right. And I believe that's why
3 hours?
and I believe that's why the 30 minutes would be considered for one, could potentially be considered depending on how it falls. Like, for example, the middle school is a little further away, so if it's 30 minutes in between, whatever the case may be, I believe that was the final recommendation that came back from NCDOT. Yeah, so we provided a couple of options for acceptable bell schedules, which we included starting at 7:15 for the one, 7:45 for the other, or 7:30 and 8:30. And those fell outside of the other two bell schedules for the middle school and high school, which I don't have those right offhand. But
That's what page is it for, isn't it?
if you look at towards the back, it doesn't have a page number, but it would be figure 10 and green in the leader. It's actually, if you go to 3 slides, it's in this note here.
Any adjustment of bell schedule is going to happen at a church because Union County Public Schools set bell schedules by cluster.
Exactly.
To manage our school buses.
Right, so we have to work around the existing bell schedules. Correct.
Or existing, or if they, Union County Public Schools changes their bell schedule in the future.
Then I'm assuming that there would have to be some coordination with that, because if it's not taken care of initially, then you're going to start to potentially see some issues. So I believe that that's why coordination remains key, and I think that that's something that Firestone is committed to within this TA at this point, because with the potential for a spot study, and once they start getting further along in the process with phase 1, NCDOT needs to be kept in the loop so that they can keep up with their studies and provide ample coordination for that as well.
One, the original permit for the church for daycare was 65 students.
That sounds right.
And we just upped that from 65 to, I believe, 150.
That's right.
Was that factored in to the schedule?
Again, the current stepping stone schedule falls outside of either of the bell schedules we talked about here. So, again, this was discussed with NCDOT because we wanted to make sure we were accounting for what we need to. And
was the DOT aware that we upped it from 65 to 150?
it doesn't matter because our minimum amount of students is 200. So their thought process is that if we can have 200 students in the worst AM peak, so when we went out and counted, or from the counts that we had, it was from 7 to 9. So we took the highest amount of traffic on the roadway in that 2-hour period in a single-hour period. So I'm not sure the exact time. Maybe it's 7 to 8 or it's 7:30 to 8:30. Whatever the case may be, we took the highest amount of traffic in that 1 hour, and we added this traffic from the school, the 200 students, and that's what our recommendations and analysis are based on. Now, when you start to go into talking about the stepping stones, I believe their earliest is like 9, 9:15, 9:30, somewhere in that ballpark. Someone else can speak to that. But that falls outside what you would typically consider your AM peak hour or your AM rush hour. So because that falls outside of where NCDOT would determine that the most traffic is on the roadway, there's no need to analyze for 150 daycare students when we just analyzed for 200 during the worst peak and made recommendations that mitigated that impact.
The other thing that concerns me is the big red flag is the left turn lane in only will accommodate 4 cars. Even with a proposed gap that's being created by the light at the exit, do you feel that that's enough to get phase 1 or phase 2 or the daycare cars in and out?
From my analysis, I feel especially with phase 1 with the signal and the minimal students, yes, I do feel it's adequate because based on that analysis, we did not see extending queues or anything that created an eye for concern. And if NCDOT saw something that concerned them, they would recommend it because, again, the key points for them are going to be the access points. They don't want to have a school that's designed with access points that are unsafe or aren't going to work. They reviewed that information and they also deemed that the 100 feet should be acceptable. And then with phase 2 and the gaps, again, from the analysis that we put into the program to pretty much create this network, We put in all of the volumes, we put in the signal timing data, we put in the peak hour factors, which would be, in a period of how soon all people would come. So just as another bit of information, the peak hour factor, we use a 0.5 for this, which means all of the traffic for the school is coming in a 30-minute period. So it's even more condensed. And from an analysis standpoint, it's typically more conservative than what NCDOT requires. So at that point, we run through that, and then there's a simulation software that effectively runs that through. And that's what NCDOT takes those queuing and analysis results and takes those and makes determinations for where storage needs to be extended. For example, that's why we're looking at the 200-foot storage extension at Newtown and Cuthbertson, because based on that queuing simulation, that needed to be extended another 200 feet.
So is it basically you're telling me that the DOT in their analysis factored in the daycare, the school, church, regular church employee traffic, the high school, the middle school, the college line, and potentially a new subdivision down there?
If included to be in the growth rate, the only one that was specifically added to that was the development down the road. Everything else would be assumed to be covered by the growth rate, or was not required at the time of scoping because it was not approved. So then, with your question about the church, typically church peaks are on the weekends. Traffic studies for schools are only required to look at typical weekday AM and PM peak hours. So therefore, anything associated with the church or the stepping stones, again, because it falls outside of that peak hour, was not required to be studied as a part of this traffic study for NCDOT's determination of funding.
And I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry. That 3% growth rate that you mentioned, is that assumed based upon build by right on current zoning?
That actually is based off of the last 10 to 15 years of growth, whatever data is available by NCDOT. We take that and pretty much interpolate a growth rate based on what the traffic was to what it is now over the past, again, 10 to 15 years. I'm not sure exactly what's available. I think it's in here somewhere and detailed in a table. But that data is then provided in scoping to NCDOT. They review it and let us know whether or not they think it's acceptable. At that point, the local municipality would typically say, oh no, we've got all this growth going on, or we think it's higher than that, and then we come to some agreement, and the agreement was 3% for this, as agreed to by the reviewing agencies.
Okay, so as you know, in that area, there's Wesley Chapel boundaries, there's Waxhaw boundaries, and there's unincorporated Union County, all in that area. And so if any one of those entities did a rezoning to high density, that could exceed whatever that 10-year average could have been.
Potentially.
And so the 3% could be lower, could be higher if it ends up going the other direction to lower density.
It could be lower, it could be higher, but again, if you think of it from a standpoint of what's the delta or the incremental impact of this development to the roadway, that's when it matters, but it's still an apples to apples comparison to try to figure out, what this development needs to do to make their traffic work or their access work and the outside roadway intersections.
And did you say specifically at the beginning of the presentation that schools and churches do not bear the cost of road improvements? Schools.
Public or private schools.
Public or private schools do not bear the burden of the cost of improving the roads.
Correct. They can be required to do those improvements, but they must be reimbursed.
Can you explain that more in detail for people like me who don't understand exactly what that's meant?
So, for example, if NCDOT cannot say you have to go out and build this 300-foot right turn lane. Private developer, they would say, oh yeah, go out there and build that 300-foot right turn lane, right? It's private dollars. So the way it works for a school is NCDOT says, hey, we think we see the need for this 300-foot right turn lane. We want you to install that, but once it's complete, and you provide us with all documentation throughout the process, we will pay you back for everything it costs to install that rectangle.
So the church would pay for it, the DOT would reimburse them?
Yes, and the school would pay for it, and then the school would pay for it, and then NCDOT would fully pay them back for all of the cost of that turn lane, or that improvement.
And the improvement is determined by the DOT, not by the school or the church?
That's correct. So if you look at, again, page 2 of this traffic study, this is NCDOT telling the church or the school what they're willing to fund and what must be required as a part of phase 1, 200 students, and phase 2, the 400 students
And
per phase.
this may not be a question for you, but you're talking about 200 students in phase 1 and 400 students in phase 2. Is that going to be the maximum number of students that this facility will be able to hold? Or will that be just for today?
I thought it was 200 for phase 1, 800 for phase 2, and Bell schedule split 400.
That's correct. So it's 400 for both each of the Bell
So the
schedules.
Bell schedules. So phase 1 is 200 students.
Right, and we added
Phase
additional
2 is a total of 800, not 800 additional.
Correct.
So
So it's
the
not
rest-
240.
And then the improvements have to be in place before operational at 800, or, because you mentioned something.
So the improvements, from my understanding of this and how NCDOT is going to enforce it, is that before phase 1 school can have its first student, these improvements have to be in place for phase 1. So then they are fine to expand up to 200 students. Once they hit 201 and they want to add that next student, the remaining improvements must be in place. Because it's the openings of the maximum cap. So the 200 is effectively a cap of where the improvements on the previous figure would cover, and then anything above the 200 students would then require the additional improvements in green on this page.
Guys have additional questions at this time?
We are reaching the amount of time we've allotted on the agenda for tonight's public hearing. So, you have something about Phyllis witness?
Just
so how about after this witness, we adjourn to the retro meeting? We're talking about that motion she was down.
Sorry. Mr. Whip, just a few more questions. You mentioned the scoping of the TIA. Was that scoping proposed and agreed to collectively by NCDOT and the village?
Yes.
And in terms of calculating the figures that are required for the TIA, would you agree that that calculation is rather mechanical?
Yes.
And involves putting numbers into a worksheet and applying the outputs?
Yes.
And with regard to stacking, I think you mentioned, you discussed it a little bit. Will you explain a little bit more about how that works and how that operates?
Yes. So the thought process is that this is the stacking plan as shown. Go back right there. So this is the stacking plan for phase 2, and what this shows, everything you see in red is effectively a double stacked lane. So it would be 2 cars wide, snaking through the canvas. And the purpose of that is to provide the vehicles that turn into the site room to sit and wait for their turn at the pickup drop-off area without sitting on Cuthbertson and causing delays on the Cuthbertson. I know that there's, I think NCDOT is trying to learn from their previous mistakes of having, everyone line up and pretty much gridlock entire streets and schools, and now the requirements, again, for the 30% high demand are required in order to help alleviate any concerns of potential, gridlocking or blocking onto the state roadways.
Mr. O'Connor, the TIA that you completed, that's Exhibit 4, was approved by NCDOT in the village.
Yes.
In your opinion, the improvements recommended, would those provide or those meet or exceed the existing levels of service at the intersections that were studied?
Yes.
In your opinion, with the implementation of the improvements recommended, would this proposal not create dangerous traffic conflict points?
As long as it was designed and implemented per the NCDOT funding, then I would not think it would.
Is there any other information you'd like to share?
That's it. Thank you.
I'll entertain a motion to continue the public hearing on our regular schedule.
I make a motion to continue this public hearing until the January regularly scheduled council meeting.
I'll second with discussion before the vote.
So the next regular scheduled meeting is January the 10th at 7 p.m.
Question for the legal representative. Will there be additional speakers? People call?
Yes, Councilmember, just maybe 2 to 3, but they should be very brief in relation to the traffic list.
Additionally, I want to stress to everyone who's here, you may not get a chance to get up and speak this evening, but you all will get your chance.
Okay, so yes, there will be people who have standing that will be allowed to speak, and then there will be a period of public comment for people to voice their opinion, but that will not be part of the evidentiary hearing. If the public does have questions, comments, and concerns, please direct those to staff, to the clerk, and not to council. And it's clerk at
WesleyChapelNC.com. It's on the website.
It's not that we don't want to talk to you as politicians, but there's certain legal ramifications if you approach us and ask us or try to give us input or try to get input from us. So please don't do it until we're done.
Did you have a vote on that motion?
Not yet. Okay. Let's wait for discussion. Any further discussion? All right, all in favor? So we will resume the hearing on January 10th at 7 p.m. That brings us to the update on the comprehensive plan steering committee.
This way, I think our best district takes 5 of the vote.
Thank you guys for advancing slides. Yeah, that's easy. That's the hardest thing I got to do.
I know, my hands are
Point me and I wouldn't let you down.
That's okay. I didn't that's I go to Raleigh.
Yeah, that's right. You know that's hard, right? Yeah. Good luck with that.
Appreciate it.
I would be asked if they left it open. They might have other questions. They might even. I don't know if they're going to be or not, but I've seen them in the past. Once you look at evidentiary reports for the students, they might be hearing their information. So I think that people probably have because they very well might have questions. Because they're going to know what's going to happen. They'll look at the evidence. Think about it. Like, oh, what's that happen? I know it's good. So here's clearly don't have standing, and then the people that are and then there may be people that do have standing. I don't have any idea. And then there may be people that are in the middle. I don't know. If you want, I mean, as a parent, I don't think you want to like brief. But I mean, I don't know if you want. She's got one. She's good Positive division, which is pretty good.
It is pretty good.
Yeah, I know, right?
Hi, Cheryl. I'm Kristen Fry.
Hi, Chris. How are
Nice
you?
to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Good to meet you. I'm going to be on the communications.
Right.
You have my email and my phone.
I'll send you an email tomorrow and let you know when the next meeting is.
Okay. My husband is Jim Hill.
Right.
Okay. All right.
I've met Jim.
Okay. I just wanted to introduce myself to you.
Thank you.
And
is Pauline here or no?
I didn't see her here.
You know
she's
her,
a neighbor. Yeah, she's a neighbor.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I'll get in touch with both of you, and
I mean, at least
there'll be a meeting, I guess, in January. I think it would be.
Okay.
And we'll go over some things about being a committee member and what you can do and what you can't do, and open meetings law in North Carolina and different things like that.
Okay. Great. Well, it's good to meet you,
Thank
Cheryl.
you for volunteering.
Sorry.
Nice to meet you.
Bye.
Y'all can take it to the vestibule or outside, please. We still have, we're continuing our meeting.
I wasn't expecting that. In the old days, I would have been here till 1 in the morning. Well done,
Schools, right? Correct them.
Hello, Sharon, what kind of upset?
And you escort me now. Thank you.
Oh, behind you.
It was a piece of paper put behind the page, just you don't have to take it off.
Yeah, clean proof of that.
Yeah, I just want to make sure most of your paper. I'll make Mike do it later.
She will. She's laughing, but she will.
We're laughing because we do.
Are we? You're not back in. Are you back in session? I was just going to say this. In the olden days, we've been here till 2 in the morning.
I teach children these days. I cannot teach children.
No.
Not that anyone else's work is not really important, but you are educating the next generation.
Yes. And if you're like me, a very little sleep maybe leads to impulses to do mean things to children that you don't want to have as a substitute teacher.
Or maybe you do.
Or maybe you do.
You're not going anywhere, right?
Oh, do you need me? I'll stick around.
Yeah, please stick around.
Crack that whip.
Please stick around. Comprehensive Plan Steering Committee, Ron?
So we met prior to the planning board meeting several weeks ago. The primary topics for the comprehensive plan committee, the last meeting, we did go ahead and prepare an analysis of data. We were hoping that the Census Bureau would be publishing their 2020 full count data, and we get new American Community Survey data from that.
Will that have a percentage increase of the population?
We already have that. We have the raw population counts are available. The information we were hoping for, there's a 5-year smoothed data product that goes into a lot more demographic detail with economic data and education data and age breakdowns that unfortunately was originally supposed to be available like this week, and now it's not going to be until March, but we really couldn't delay things and not start looking at that information until March because we're going to be closer to being done.
Would you be, with the information you have today, would you be able to answer the question of what percentage of growth there has been in Wesley Chapel?
Yes.
Because it was relevant to the issue at hand this evening of the 3% growth calculation?
We can. We have all that information available to the comprehensive planning committee. I'm happy to email it to the rest of the council. We did update that one chart in there that had the incorrect percentage in it, so we got that fixed. So we did go through all that information. We also, after the meeting, there were some questions about historic resources in Wesley Chapel. We did do some mapping of those based on some information we were able to get from Union County. The other thing we looked at was an example of vision and guiding principles from another community, just to provide an example to the steering committee of what we were asking them to be working on. And so we'll be sending out something before Christmas in preparation for our January meeting. We're, of course, not meeting this month because the planning board is not meeting. And it would also be like the day after Christmas, basically. So, you know, and with the demographic information we presented, like I said, we were originally hoping that the new information would be ready in like this week. Census Bureau right before the last meeting since it announced that it wouldn't be done until March. That's the third or fourth delay of that, and so we didn't want to delay things any longer. So we'll moving forward with that. We will look at the data when it comes out just to make sure there's nothing really big that's different between the information we have and the new data that will theoretically be publishing in March. But I have pretty good confidence that there won't be a lot of changes and we can move forward with what we have. And it won't materially affect anything that we discussed. But if anyone else is interested in seeing what we looked at any of our previous meetings, we're happy to share that with you. I think Cheryl, might have put some of that on the website, maybe not.
Yeah, I think so.
Well, I'll get some updated stuff for you on the website for anyone that's interested. So next meeting prior to the planning board January meeting.
Any questions for Ron?
Who's making up the steering committee these days?
Those three. John Lepke, Francesca, I keep on...
Francesca Mazariegos.
And then Bjorn is joining us from Union County to provide some input from the county's perspective, and that's the crew.
Okay. So a bunch of smart people.
Very, very smart, well, highly positioned people in the community.
I want to tell John we laugh.
Just the way you said it, that was great.
Yeah.
Was great.
Mark, to your point, we have a representative from the communications committee and Deb, so as part of the steering committee. With her resignation, do we need to pull someone in from communications?
That's completely up to you all.
Cheryl and I actually talked about this because it creates a forum now.
And you can't have a crew there.
But what I said was Deb's been involved from the start. Like everybody's been involved from the start, and I don't want to kick anybody off. It'll be easier just to publish that there could be a forum of council.
That's why your regular meeting schedule included all the rest of the meetings of the committee.
Yeah.
I felt like since everybody started, everybody wanted to do it.
And Francesca still is in communication.
Oh, okay.
It's just planning board.
Planning board doesn't have
Planning
a
board probably isn't represented.
Well, that's a biggie.
I'm busy. So maybe we see if we can add a planning board member.
If we need to.
Are we still staying away from planning board meetings?
There's nothing to stay.
So if we're going to talk about liaisons,
There's no meeting this month.
we'll circle back to it. Okay. So we're good with the steering committee?
No, just one other question. The focus groups that we had put together
Yes.
before, or do we won't need?
We were not using those as a formal part of this process. If there's some desire to, on the part of the committee or the council, to engage with them in some structured way as we move forward, then we can engage with those folks. I'm not sure. It's probably been almost 2 years since they were contacted. I don't know who all these people are necessarily. It's been a long time since I've
a long time.
looked at that. But if that's a component of the public outreach that the committee or the council would like for us to do, then we can work that into our process. Either as part of the, before we did our community conversations, we had talked about what that additional public engagement might be, and that can be one part of it. We'd also talked about having an event here in the springtime, as well as another indoor type meeting as we got further along in the process. So.
All right, so it brings us to LUMA. Our last meeting was in spring. We had Jonathan Thomas, who is the planning board, Union County Planning Board Chair, come and talk a little bit about ECJ. And basically, like, regardless of what the 2050 committee recommended, how are the commissioners going to actually put that into process? So he seemed to talk like we would know soon how the county was going to implement those transition areas, or what are they called?
We're going to work with county commissioners on transition areas instead of ETJ.
Because that was what was recommended in the plan. That was, but how are they going to do it? Like, it's between Weddington and Wesley Chapel. Mm-hmm. How are they going to decide who gets to influence the area?
Our study area for the comprehensive plan has included most of those areas within the study area. There will be land use recommendations from the village side for those transition areas as well as part of the future land use map.
So we'll be prepared.
We'll be ready to go.
Have that in writing beforehand.
Yeah.
So I was going to ask if there was going to be any kind of teeth in that, how much you can.
And I think that's one thing he was saying, like, it remains to be seen.
Saying is one thing, doing is another.
It's an election year. But that's really it. They're not meeting this month, so a nice little break. Any questions? So, George, we only have one closed session on the agenda. Can we add one? Talk about what just happened?
If you're seeking legal advice from me on
Yes.
then yes.
Okay. All right. So, thank you for coming.
Sherry, we need an escort out.
Yeah, we'll make sure Brandon gets you safe.
Do you have a ride home?
No, he went to Target to get a gift for somebody. He's coming back. Yeah.
You want Brandon?
I was gonna say.
I got a backseat.